In 1962, the average American father worked 48 hours a week, and not once did he mention it at the dinner table. He just came home, hung his hat by the door, and asked how your day was. There was a language spoken by the men of that generation, and it had almost no words in it. It was spoken in warmed-up cars on frozen mornings, in checked locks, in the quiet way he always took the smallest piece of chicken. Number 14 on this list is something almost every father did that his kids never noticed until he was gone. And number 3 will make you want to call your dad tonight. These weren't chores, they were a code. Before we count them down, hit that subscribe button, because your father never asked for credit, but he earned it. Let's begin with number 30. Number 30, he warmed up the car on frozen mornings. Before the sun came up, before anyone else stirred, your father was already outside in the dark, his breath hanging white in the air. He'd start the engine and let it idle, scraping frost from the windshield with a plastic scraper or the edge of an old library card. By the time you shuffled out half asleep, the heater was blowing warm and the vinyl seats had lost their bite of cold. He never mentioned it. He just did it every winter morning, so his family would never have to climb into a freezing car. In 1965, gas ran about 30 cents a gallon, and he'd happily burn a little just to spare you the shiver. Number 29, he never let the gas tank fall below a quarter. Not for himself, for your mother. He knew she'd be running errands, hauling groceries, ferrying kids to practice, and the last thing he wanted was for her to be stranded on the shoulder of some road with the needle on empty. So on Sunday evenings, he'd quietly take the car down to the Texaco station and fill it up, checking the oil while he was at it. She rarely knew. She'd just notice week after week that the tank always seemed full. That was no accident. It was a man thinking 3 days ahead about a problem that would never happen because he'd already solved it. He measured his love in gallons. Number 28. He checked every lock before bed. When the house went quiet and the dishes were dried and put away, your father made his rounds. The front door, the back door, the windows, the latch on the garage. You'd hear his footsteps on the stairs, the click of a switch, the low creak of the floorboards as he moved through the dark house one last time. He wasn't afraid of anything. He simply believed it was his job to stand between his sleeping family and whatever might be out there. In an age before alarm systems and security cameras, the alarm system was him. Every night, the same ritual, so everyone under his roof could close their eyes without a single thought of danger. He carried that weight, so you never had to feel it. Number 27. He walked on the street side of the sidewalk. It was such a small thing that you probably never noticed. But whenever your father walked with your mother, or with you, he quietly positioned himself between you and the passing traffic. It came from an older tradition, back when passing carriages splashed mud, but he did it out of pure instinct. If a car ever jumped the curb, it would hit him first. He never announced it, never explained it, just shifted his body to the outside without breaking the conversation. It was a reflex older than he was, passed down from his own father, a quiet declaration that as long as he was there, the danger came through him before it reached you. Number 26. He put his coat over your shoulders. On cold nights at the ball game, or waiting outside a movie theater, or walking to the car after a long dinner, the moment he saw you shiver, off came his jacket. He'd drape it over your shoulders, still warm from his body, smelling faintly of aftershave and the day he'd worked. And then he'd stand there in his shirt sleeves in the cold, insisting he was perfectly fine. He was almost never perfectly fine. He was cold too, but the idea of being warm while you were shivering simply did not sit right with him. That coat, far too big, was one of the first times you understood what it meant for someone to rather suffer a little so you didn't have to. Number 25. He ate the burnt piece. When the toast came out too dark, or one pancake got scorched on the griddle, or the end of the roast was dry, your father claimed it as his own. "That's the one I like," he'd say, and take it before anyone else could. He gave the good pieces to the kids and kept the mistakes. He took the smallest chop, the heel of the bread, the wing instead of the breast. He did it so smoothly and so consistently that for years you believed he genuinely preferred the burnt toast. He didn't. He just decided without ceremony that his family would get the best of everything, and he would take what was left. That was the whole arithmetic of his life. Number 24. He fixed it instead of buying new. When the toaster stopped working, your father didn't throw it out. He unplugged it, turned it over on the kitchen table, and got out his screwdriver. When the lawnmower wouldn't start, he pulled the spark plug and cleaned it. When your bike chain slipped, he had it back on in 10 minutes with grease up to his wrists. He came from a generation that believed almost anything could be saved with patience and the right tool. In 1958, a new appliance meant real money, and he'd been raised to make do, but it went deeper than thrift. That instinct to repair rather than replace was how he approached nearly everything, including people. Number 23. He sharpened the kitchen knives. Every few weeks, your father would take the dull knives out to the garage or set up at the kitchen counter with his whetstone or that old steel rod. There was a rhythm to it, the slow rasp of metal on stone, the careful angle, the test against his thumb. He knew that a dull knife was more dangerous than a sharp one, and he wanted the tools in his house to work the way they were meant to. Your mother would find the blades gliding through tomatoes like they were water, and never quite know why. He didn't tell her. He just kept the edges keen, quietly maintaining the small machinery of a family's life. Number 22. He shoveled the neighbor's walk too. After a heavy snow, your father was out before breakfast, bundled up, clearing the driveway and the front walk with steady, methodical strokes. But he didn't stop at the property line. He'd push on down to the Hendersons' place next door, the older couple who couldn't manage it anymore, and clear their walk as well. He never knocked to be thanked. He never mentioned it at dinner. By the time they looked out their window, the job was already done, and he was back inside stamping snow off his boots. He believed that being a man meant noticing who around you was struggling and quietly doing something about it. That was neighborliness in its purest form. Number 21. He kept emergency cash hidden away. Somewhere in the house, tucked in a coffee can, folded inside an old book, or taped under a drawer, your father kept a small stash of money that nobody was supposed to touch. It wasn't much, maybe a few 20s, but it was there for the day something went wrong. The car broke down far from home, the furnace died in January, or a bill came due before payday. He'd lived through lean times, and he never wanted his family caught short. That hidden cash was a quiet promise to himself that no matter what happened, he'd be ready. He carried the fear so his family could live without it, one saved bill at a time, and hoping he'd never need it. Number 20, he carried the heaviest load. Grocery bags, suitcases, the water cooler jug, the box of Christmas decorations from the attic. Whenever there was something heavy to be moved, your father took the worst of it without being asked. He would load himself down with 4 bags in each hand rather than make a second trip or let you carry the light one while he shouldered the back-breaking piece of furniture. His back ached. His knees complained. He did it anyway. In his mind, that was simply what his body was for, to spend itself on the hard tasks so the people he loved did not have to strain. He never framed it as sacrifice. It was just the natural order of things. The strongest carried the most and asked for nothing. Number 19. He sat up late with a checkbook and a pencil. Long after the house had gone to sleep, your father sat at the kitchen table under a single lamp, the checkbook open, a stack of bills beside him, and a pencil worn down to a nub. He'd add and subtract, cross things out, and balance the account down to the last penny. Some nights the numbers were tight, and he'd sit there a long while, doing the quiet arithmetic of keeping a family afloat. You never saw the worry on his face, because he made sure you were asleep before he let it show. By morning the bills were paid and stacked by the door, and he'd be at the breakfast table smiling, carrying a weight he refused to let anyone else feel. Number 18. He taught you to change a tire in the rain. He didn't wait for a sunny afternoon. When the flat happened, it happened in the drizzle on the side of the highway, and your father saw it as a lesson rather than an inconvenience. He knelt down on the wet gravel in his good pants and showed you how to set the jack, how to break the lug nuts loose before you lift, how to keep the bolts from rolling into the mud. He was patient and firm and completely unbothered by his soaked shirt. He wanted you to be the kind of person who could handle yourself when things went wrong, who wouldn't stand helpless waiting for rescue. He was preparing you for 100 bad days he wouldn't be there to fix. Number 17. He always had a handkerchief. Folded neatly in his back pocket, clean and pressed, your father carried a handkerchief every single day, and it was always for someone else. A skinned knee, a runny nose, a spill on the seat, a woman crying at a funeral. He'd produce it in an instant, offer it without a word, and never ask for it back. It was one of those small, forgotten courtesies of his generation, a readiness to be useful in a moment of need. He seemed to anticipate the messes and heartbreaks of the people around him, and quietly came prepared. That folded square of cotton was a tiny symbol of the whole man, always ready, always thinking of others, always carrying exactly what someone else might need. Number 16. He checked the oil before every family trip. The night before a long drive, your father would be out in the driveway with the hood up, checking the oil, the coolant, the belts, the tire pressure. He'd wipe the dipstick on a rag, hold it to the light, and top off whatever needed topping off. He wanted the car ready so that the trip would be nothing but open road and good memories, not a breakdown that stranded his family in the heat. He treated a family vacation like an expedition to be provisioned and planned. When you piled in the next morning, you never gave a single thought to whether the car would get you there. He'd already made sure it would. Number 15. He held the door and stood when someone entered. Your father held doors, pulled out chairs, and rose to his feet when a woman or an older person came into the room. He tipped his hat. He said, "Sir and ma'am," and he taught you to do the same. To him, manners weren't stuffy formality. They were a way of showing respect, of announcing without words that the people around him mattered. In a diner, in a church, at a family gathering, he moved through the world with a quiet courtesy that seemed to come from another time. He believed that how you treated people in the small moments revealed exactly who you were, and so he made the small moments count, one held door at a time. Number 14. He looked in on you while you slept. Late at night, when the house was still, your father would crack open your bedroom door and stand in the hallway light for a moment, just watching you breathe. Maybe he pulled the blanket back over your shoulder. Maybe he picked a fallen toy off the floor. Maybe he just stood there a while, taking in the sight of his child safe and asleep before pulling the door quietly shut. You almost never knew he was there. It was a private ritual, a father's silent way of counting his blessings at the end of a hard day. In those quiet seconds in the doorway, all the fatigue and worry fell away, and he remembered exactly what all of it was for. Number 13. He went to work sick and never complained. When the cold hit, or his back seized up, or the headache pounded behind his eyes, your father got dressed and went to work anyway. There was no such thing as a mental health day, no calling in for a sniffle. A missed day was a missed paycheck, and there were mouths to feed, so he pushed through, aching and exhausted, and you'd never have known unless you looked closely at his tired eyes. He believed that showing up day after day, no matter how he felt, was the most basic duty of a man. That relentless reliability was its own kind of heroism. He wore his body down slowly, year after year, so the checks never stopped coming and the family never went without. Number 12. He kept his tools in perfect order. Out in the garage, your father had a workbench where every tool had its place. The wrenches hung in order of size, the screws sorted into baby food jars, the drawers labeled in his careful block handwriting. He could reach for any tool in the dark and find it. That order was not fussiness, it was respect for the work, for the tools that had served him, and for whoever might need to find something in a hurry. He had inherited some of those tools from his own father and intended to pass them on the same way, cleaned and oiled and ready. That workbench was his kingdom, a place where a man could fix what was broken and feel for an hour completely in control of his small corner of the world. Number 11. He let you steer the car up the driveway. When you were small, your father would pull into the driveway, then lift you onto his lap and let your little hands grip the bottom of the wheel while he worked the pedals. "You're driving," he'd say, and you'd steer that big car those last few feet to the garage, absolutely certain you were doing it all yourself. It was a tiny gift of trust and adventure, a secret shared just between the two of you. He knew exactly how much that little thrill meant to a kid. Those short drives up the driveway are some of the earliest memories a lot of us have of our fathers, the sound of his laugh, and the feeling of being trusted with something enormous. Number 10. He woke first and made the coffee. Before the alarm clocks, before the school buses, before anyone else opened their eyes, your father was already awake in the quiet kitchen, standing over the percolator as it began to gurgle. That smell of coffee drifting up the stairs was the smell of the day beginning, of a house being gently woken by the one person who never got to sleep in. He liked those still minutes alone before the world got loud, but he was also standing guard, easing everyone into the morning. By the time the rest of the family stumbled down, the coffee was hot and he was dressed and ready. He started every day before the people he loved so that when they woke, the world was already warm and waiting for them. Number 9. He waited up with the porch light on. When you got older and started going out at night, your father left the porch light burning and stayed awake in his chair until he heard your key in the door. He would pretend he had just happened to still be up, maybe with the television murmuring low, but you both knew the truth. He could not sleep until every one of his kids was home safe. That light in the window was a beacon that said no matter how far you wandered or how late it got, there was a place where someone was waiting for you. He never made a show of it, never guilt-tripped you about the hour. He just needed to know you had made it back, and only then did he finally go to bed. Number 8. He watched from the driveway until you were gone. When you finally grew up and drove away, off to college, off to your own life, your father stood in the driveway and watched. He didn't go back inside when you hugged him goodbye. He stayed out there one hand raised and watched your taillights until they disappeared around the corner and there was nothing left to see. Then he stood a moment longer in the empty street before going in. It's one of the images that stays with people forever, a father growing smaller in the rearview mirror. In that long look was every year he'd spent raising you and every fear he had about letting you go, all of it held in a single raised hand. Number 7, he paid every bill without a word about money. Your father handled the money and kept his worries about it entirely to himself. The mortgage, the doctor, the school clothes, the Christmas gifts, all of it flowed through his hands, and yet you grew up feeling secure, never once made to feel like a burden or an expense. If times were tight, you didn't hear about it. He absorbed the stress, made the sacrifices, went without the new coat so you could have yours, and he did it all silently. He believed that financial worry was a grown man's job, not a thing to lay on a child's shoulders. So he carried it alone, protecting your childhood from the one thing that kept him awake at night. Number 6, he gave you the good seat and the last bite, the window seat on the plane, the front seat of the car, the last piece of pie he'd been eyeing all through dinner. Whatever the small prize was, your father quietly handed it to you. He'd claim he didn't want it, that he was full, that he liked the middle seat just fine. It was never true, and after a while you came to understand that. But he simply took more joy in your having the good thing than in having it himself. It's a strange kind of math that only parents seem to understand, where giving something away feels better than keeping it. He practiced that math every day in 1,000 tiny ways you never noticed until you had children of your own. Number 5, he took the blame to spare your mother worry. When something went wrong, a dent in the fender, a broken window, a bad decision that landed on the family, your father had a way of stepping in front of it. He'd tell your mother he'd handle it, absorb the fault, smooth it over before it grew into something that would keep her up at night. He shielded her from 100 small storms she never even knew were brewing. It was part of an old understanding between them that he would stand between his family and the hard, worrying edges of the world. He didn't do it for credit, because credit would have meant she knew. He did it so the people he loved could sleep easy while he lay awake, quietly sorting it all out. Number 4, he saved everything. Coffee cans full of mismatched nails and screws, a drawer of rubber bands and twist ties, balls of string, spare buttons, the odd key to a lock no one could remember. Your father saved it all, and your mother teased him for it. And then one day something would break, and he'd reach into that chaos and pull out exactly the right piece. He'd grown up in a time when you didn't throw things away, because you never knew when you'd need them, and that habit stayed with him for life. Those cluttered drawers weren't junk. They were a quiet faith that with enough saved-up odds and ends, a man could fix almost any problem the world handed his family. And more often than you'd believe, he was right. Number 3, he kept a photo of you in his wallet until it wore soft. Somewhere behind his driver's license and a couple of worn dollar bills, your father carried a small photograph of you, creased and faded from years of being taken out and looked at. Maybe it was your school picture, or a snapshot from a birthday, curling at the corners and soft as cloth from the handling. He never made a big deal of it, but at work, on his break, on a long drive, he'd slide it out and look at the reason for all of it, the reason he got up before dawn and worked through the pain and never complained. That little photo went everywhere he went, a quiet reminder tucked against his heart that everything he did for you. Number 2, he never said the words but showed it every day. Your father may have gone his whole life rarely, if ever, saying "I love you" out loud. Men of his generation often didn't have those words or believed that saying them wasn't the point. But he said it in every other language he knew. He said it in the warmed-up car and the checked locks and the full gas tank. He said it in the burnt toast he ate and the coat he gave away and the porch light he left burning. He said it in showing up day after day, year after year, without applause. His love was a verb, not a sentence. And once you learned to read it, you realized he'd been saying it all along. Number 1, he left every morning and came home every night. In the end, the greatest thing your father did without ever being asked was the simplest and the hardest of all. He stayed. He got up before the sun, went out into a world that asked everything of him, and then he came home. Not once, not for a season, but for decades, in good years and lean ones, tired and aching and worried. He kept coming back through that same front door. There were no medals for it, no ceremonies, no thanks. Just a man showing up for his family every day of his life, so reliably that you came to take it for granted, the way you take for granted that the sun will rise. That constancy was the whole foundation you stood on. That was his quiet, unbreakable love. Across all 30 of these, from the warmed-up car to the man who simply kept coming home, one truth runs through every entry. Your father spoke a language with almost no words in it, a language of small, unasked-for acts that added up to a life of devotion. He didn't do these things for thanks, but if any of this reminded you of your own dad, do the one thing he never asked for. Call him or tell him or just remember him, because the men of that generation carried the world quietly, and they deserve to know we finally noticed.